Good afternoon, and hello to everyone online, wherever you happen to be today. I would first like to thank ITS for offering me the chance to update all of you on some of the major policy and governmental activities we are working on here in the Office of Spectrum Management. As sister offices within NTIA, ITS, and OSM work closely with each other on a range of technical and policy related efforts. ISART gives us a chance to touch base on our work together and to gain new perspectives from each other and from all of our participants. So I look forward to hearing the discussions over the next few days, and I welcome the chance to add my views on behalf of OSM. And it's certainly good to be back at ISART. One of the most important developments that I want to touch on is the Spectrum Coordination Initiative. The good news is that we are addressing the institutional factors between the NTIA and FCC that can lead to policymaking impasses. And by we, I mean both NTIA and FCC, a fact that we should not overlook. Chairman Rosenworcel deserves a lot of credit for this, and Assistant Secretary Davidson, who you heard just a few minutes ago, has responded to that leadership with his own active pursuit of improved coordination and collaboration. So what does this actually entail? Well, in plain language, it calls for the more frequent meetings between the FCC Chairwoman Rosenworcel and NTIA Administrator Davidson, reaffirmation of the agency's roles and responsibilities in spectrum management, commitment to evidence-based decision-making and scientific integrity, and increased technical collaboration. One of the first items on the list to implement those objectives is to review and update the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, that exists between the FCC and NTIA. This MOU provides the framework and impetus for interagency coordination. So the two agencies have formed a joint task force that is actively reviewing and considering changes to the MOU. In keeping with the spirit of the Spectrum Coordination Initiative, the task force is exploring ways to increase bilateral meetings, adhere to evidence-based decision-making, and engage in mutually shared long-range planning. The task force is making progress, and as Assistant Secretary Davidson informed Congress last week that he and Chairwoman Rosenworcel have agreed to complete the work on the draft MOU by the end of July. Another important activity that dovetails with the initiative is the cooperation around developing a new national spectrum strategy. Stakeholders are working to put together a forward-looking, collaborative, whole of government strategy that will address the needs of federal and non-federal users. A key element in our discussions is how to increase collaboration among the regulators and federal agencies. We are also interested in promoting evidence and science-based decision-making and leveraging technological advances to create opportunities in the spectrum space. These discussions and the entire strategy development remain at an early stage. As we develop and then implement a strategy, we will consult with a wide variety of stakeholders, both inside and outside of government. One of the cornerstones of NTIA's approach in spectrum management is to support and incentivize the development of new technologies, particularly in the form of spectrum sharing. Already, we are seeing promising signs of that innovation in the CBRS band, that's 3550 to 3700 megahertz, that can pave the way for additional advances in dynamic spectrum access. The CBRS radio service is taking shape in this band and incorporates a multi-tiered access licensing system that relies upon dynamic protection areas to empower commercial wireless systems while protecting important and critical incumbent military radar operations. So this system, which took several years to develop and implement, transformed what has been a doubtful sharing scenario into a viable national CBRS footprint that is utilizing core mid-band spectrum. The CBRS auction, completed a couple years ago, raised approximately $4.6 billion. CBRS has been extremely helpful in showing how much spectrum management tools can be integrated with new licensing approaches to enable new services, both licensed and unlicensed alike, while preserving existing government missions. We're not stopping there, of course. The incumbent informing capability, or what we call the IIC, is a concept that is exploring mechanisms for dynamically sharing spectrum among incumbents and new users in the time domain, in a way not possible with current spectrum management practices and capabilities. IIC can move spectrum management out of the traditional man-in-the-middle approach and into the software domain. It could also establish a common dynamic sharing framework that would be scalable across multiple bands. I want to emphasize the relevance of IIC and other technological innovations in the policy development efforts like the new spectrum strategy and even the spectrum coordination initiatives. First, we have all been discussing for many years the increasing difficulties we are experiencing in providing for ever-growing spectrum requirements in both the non-federal and federal jurisdictions. It is becoming harder and harder to manage our way out of these difficult choices in the traditional sense. In the absence of innovative techniques and technologies, we risk continuing to relitigate the same institutional rivalries and spectrum access disputes. Second, the innovations themselves can spur new equipment development, the growth of new services and ecosystems, and continued U.S. high-tech leadership. So as we look forward, we embrace technology as an enabler of spectrum access, and we reject zero-sum gamemanship that posits every spectrum band as a win or lose proposition. Of course, we have to proceed with a solid foundation of spectrum management principles. And that is what we are now discussing within NTIA and our agency partners in the Policy and Plan Steering Group, or as we call the PPSG. It's a common set of federal spectrum management principles. So at this point, we're positing three basic ones. Number one, making spectrum-related decisions to optimize based upon evidence driven by the best available science and accurate, precise data, to include using agreed-upon risk-based criteria when assessing electromagnetic compatibility. Develop new systems that can use the spectrum efficiently with a focus on coexistence and flexibility. And manage spectrum use to optimize access across users based upon national priorities. So let me elaborate what we mean by these principles. So with regard to the first one, using agreed-upon risk-based criteria for assessing our decisions. The spectrum-related decisions, especially those adjusting equities and protection between users, must be evidence-based and guided by the best available science and data. Collaboration among stakeholders to share scientific and technological information, data, and evidence is central to the development of sound spectrum policies and to the delivery of equitable access for all users across a wide range of heterogeneous uses and use cases. On the second principle, new spectrum-dependent systems must use spectrum efficiently and be capable of supporting new spectrum optimizing technologies. Federal agencies should be selecting designs that meet operational requirements while maintaining compatibility in their spectrum environments. This means making greater investments in systems that enhance spectrum efficiency whenever possible. This implies that when we procure or modify systems, we recognize that spectrum has value and we look for systems that maximize spectrum access for other users, including other federal users. And the last one is we recognize that spectrum is a national resource. At its root, spectrum belongs to the public, and government agencies need to access that spectrum so they can provide the services that the public needs and demands. Based with that, we know that access to spectrum provides consumers, businesses, and local governments the ability to harness the power of the internet, transforming the way we live, work, learn, and communicate. To reap the benefits of this nation as a whole, we must have a forward-looking strategic policy based upon national priorities to make spectrum use more efficient and to make more spectrum available for the future needs of Americans, all of them. So in conclusion, weaving together where this policy stands, we are in a moment in government where we must work together to coordinate not only our strategic goals, but also the institutional practices and processes that must dovetail. Evidence-based decision-making must lead the way in our planning and discussions. And our ACE card is our ability to support innovation, to leverage new technologies, techniques, and tools into better approaches to resolve spectrum access constraints and dilemmas. In that spirit, we welcome you back to ISART, and we look forward to a free-spirited and a constructive week of discussions and debate. in the finest tradition of the spectrum community. Thank you, and now back to Eric.